Many thanks for joining us now. From Kwame Nkrumah to John Evans at Tamils, and now John Ejekun Kuffour. I'm not telling you about just the names of former presidents, but these are the names of the floating production, storage and offloading vessels, FPSOs, which have been on the Jubilee 10 and now Sankofa fields respectively since the year 2010, when commercial production of oil began in Ghana. But when you go just a few miles on the shore of the Western region and the country of Ghana in general, the story seems a bit different for the citizens there. For them, these names are just names of former presidents, and also there's no real connection with the oil discovery and the oil industry itself. So our reporters went on the streets of Sekondi Takoradi to ask them, as the president turns the valve on the FPSO John Ejekun Kuffour today, what are your impressions? Are you satisfied with what has gone on so far in the oil sector? This is what they had to say.
What I'm expecting, you haven't achieved a lot, you know. Things are very, very tough in the country, you know. House is a problem in the country. Even the food the people eat is very expensive in the country. Everything is very, very expensive in the country. For so many years, since oil came, I haven't seen much improvement in our life. Like what I can say, I see that there's a lot of, the development is going, a lot of development is going, but the development is going, the people are suffering. If development is going, and the people are so feeling good, it's good. But the development is going, you can say that they're making Alpha everywhere. Alpha is very, very good. The government is building schools, so it's very, very, very good. But how are the people, the lifestyle of the people?
The Western region, we were thinking we will have something better. But considering our status at this moment, we are seeing nothing over there. There's nothing changed. What we were expecting that the country will, get something better from it. It's not what we are receiving now. So I think, let's hope that from this time something better will come.
I was expecting to see more jobs and development, but I didn't see anything. Well, I'll say some of the youth benefited by getting jobs. That's all I can say about it. But apart from that, I didn't see any improvement.
I cannot say you haven't seen any benefit in the exploration, because if Ghana benefits, then all of us have benefited. But at the Western region, say how you were expecting the oil to benefit or to get into the system, you are not seeing it like that. You thought since the oil is closer to the city, you find the workers staying in the place, buying things, trading, and everything would be like we are in a big city or a busy city. But you don't see it in that way. All the workers, the big men are not staying in Takoradi. Some of them are in Accra, some of them maybe on the sea or near the place. So you are not feeling how you should feel, how the oil is working in this place as we want it. But all the same, since the oil is there for Ghana, we think we should all support it and maybe look forward for what will happen to us. Because when they started, we saw companies cropping up, especially on the Takoradi Agron-Kwantel road. But now, I think everything has gone down, and we expect them to do something better than this.
It seems to be the same story from all the persons we spoke to on the streets of Sekondi Takoradi. A lot of disappointments there, but let's come to the studio where we've been joined by Dr. Steve Mantiao. He is the chairman of the Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas. He's also a member of the Public Interest Accountability Committee. Thank you very much for your time,
Thank you for
Doctor. So first of all, let's try and get some background. The Sankofa field, FPSO John Ejekun Kuffour, is it the same as what's happening on Jubilee and 10 with Evans at Tamils and the Kwame Nkrumah FPSOs?
Yeah, broadly in terms of the technical specifications is the same, to the extent that it's going to perform the same function as the at Tamils and then Kwame Nkrumah is doing. That is for production purposes, also for storage and for offloading. So the functions are the same, and therefore the equipment are also the same.
What about the resources we are going to get from the field?
Yeah, the resources vary slightly. If you look at the Jubilee, we are doing predominantly oil and associated gas. In the case of the 10 project, we are also doing predominantly oil and some associated gas. In respect of Sankofa Junami, we are doing predominantly gas and associated oil.
What does this mean in terms of benefits?
You recall, I mean, if you look at the government's own policy objectives for the energy sector, we seek to maximize benefits from, particularly from the gas resources of this country, to achieve energy sufficiency. And so to the extent that our major field, which will give us a lot more gas, is coming on stream, means that we're going to have a way of dealing with our inadequate supply of fuel for power generation in this country.
So this is going to be more of a benefit to the power sector directly, not really a financial benefit to the country?
Yeah, I think we can count the benefit much more in respect of our fuel sufficiency for the purpose of power generation.
So looking at the work you've done with PIAC, I realized that there are reports coming out, and you in particular have mentioned that government says we've done this project here with oil proceeds. You go there, you do not see that's not the full picture. Does that clearly depict, you know, the revenues we've been getting from Jubilee and 10 fields?
Yeah, I think that is a major problem going forward that we need to tackle head on. We have, over the last 7 years, spread the oil revenues so thinly that people are unable to feel the impact. I would say that there's also poor supervision of projects that are being financed with oil revenue. This we found out during our field visit to the north. And so you rightly noted that a lot of the projects that are being financed with oil revenue are non-existent.
Well, those were your words.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that is contained in our report from our trip. Let me say that this is happening because the Minister for Finance over the past 7 years has failed to comply with the provision of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, I think Section 48, which requires that the minister compiles a report, a reconciliation report on the petroleum funds, and present this to Parliament. In that report, the minister is required, I think clause 2 of that section, to actually give indication as to the state of completion of projects that are being funded with oil revenue.
Okay.
This the minister has not done in the last 6 years. That's under the President Mahama administration.
So who is he supposed to disclose this to?
To Parliament and to the people of Ghana. The current minister has also compiled its first report of petroleum revenue as part of the 2017 budget. In this report too, there is no compliance with this requirement to indicate, for instance, if a project is being funded with oil revenue, the stage of completion of that project. If it's fully completed, halfway completed, or if it's a school building, if it's only at a foundation level, window level, whatever level, we're supposed to know so that we monitor progress of implementation of that project being funded with oil revenues. To the extent that the minister has failed to comply with this, means that we're unable to tell even whether or not projects being funded with oil money are on course or not.
Now, in light of what you are telling us, that to get the full picture, the minister would have to give us more information. Would it be fair then to say that the sentiments that are being expressed from people in Takoradi and generally across the country is a little bit too early?
Well, it is not a bit too early. If there are benefits from the resource, host communities or French communities would expect to receive an equitable share of that benefit. And so from day one, for me, it's not out of place for people in the region to begin to demand their due share of the benefits accruing from the resource. But let me also note that the demands being made or the expectations of the people in the Western region are a bit on the high side. And this is largely because of the manner in which the news of our oil discovery was handled by the authorities. On the political side, the government of the day attempted to make a political capital out of the discovery by indicating to the people of the Western region, to all Ghanaians, that our poverty situation is going to be a thing of the past. On the part of the companies, they also needed to seize on the discovery to kind of hype their share values, because a lot of them, Talo in particular, is listed, and therefore the kind of high expectation created from that discovery meant that there will be a high demand for their shares on the stock market. And so this has fed into the perceptions of the people in the Western region, leading to unrealistic expectations on their part.
Wow, wouldn't unrealistic be a bit of a harsh expression to use?
Yeah, I say unrealistic because let us recognize that the benefits are growing, and if I may indicate, from 2011 to 2016, the total revenue realized from oil extraction in this country, that is what has accrued to the state of Ghana, is about $3.4 billion. $3.4 billion. Let us note that not all of this amount has been available for spending. The law, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, Act 815 of 2011, allows us to spend only 70% of that amount. Some may say that 70% is not only, but let us also recognize that we made a dramatic shift from the situation where we spend all our resource revenue to now saving at least 30%.
So where does this 30 go?
The other 30 goes into the petroleum funds, that's the heritage and the stabilization funds. And if for nothing at all, even if we've mismanaged the 70% available for spending, we can say for sure that at least there's some money sitting in the heritage fund in the region of about $300 million, which we can point to as a direct benefit from oil extraction.
But it's even argued, and of course, we will be coming into the Sankofa discussion proper, because with Sankofa, it's not really monetary benefits we are getting so much from it. So we would even have to do some managing of public expectation with that. But before we get to that, it's even argued, and it's come up under the former administration, under this administration, that putting aside 30% of the money may not be prudent, looking at the challenges we have today.
So which one is prudent? You mine and treat your oil revenues like you've done with gold. Over 100 years of mining gold in this country, and we have nothing to show for it? Is that the most prudent way to go? Is it not an indictment?
Nothing to show for it, isn't that too much to say?
Yeah, what is there to show for our 100 years of mining gold in this country? Can you point to one thing that we have done with gold revenue in this country? I can point to misery, environmental degradation, and disenchanted communities across the country where we mine gold. And so for me, in 2008, when we started the process of putting together the governance framework for the oil sector, we made a dramatic shift from treating our natural resource revenue as income for consumption and to treating it as income for investment. The most prudent thing that you want to do as a resource owner is to invest your income from your natural resources and live off the dividends from that investment. We all do that in our private lives. When you have capital, you don't spend your capital. You make your capital work for you, and you live off the profit from your investments. That's what we are trying to do now.
Right, but even with the 70% that we've had to spend, and again, it comes back to your work with PIAC, that is also problematic, isn't it?
Of course, there are issues with it in terms of efficiency of spending and some abuses that we have identified in relation to how we are spending these revenues. Yeah.
So now we are looking at Sankofa specifically. Sankofa is something that we are going to get gas from to power power generation infrastructure. How is that going to be different? What should we expect from the Sankofa field?
Yeah, let me correct some misconception here. Even though we seek to maximize our benefits in the gas subsector, it is not going to be for free. Let us know that there's a gas sales agreement established between us and the producer of the gas, E&I, and so we are going to buy this gas. So there is a certain level at which we are monetizing our gas and using it for power generation. It's the power availability which enables us to ensure that to ensure that we have energy sufficiency. In terms of Sankofa going forward, I do not see any dramatic shift from the way we've managed our oil revenues so far, because these are being guided by law. So we cannot depart from the current practice as dictated by the law. So we're going to derive some revenue from Sankofa. We're going to put away 30% for stabilization of the budget and also for future generation. We're going to set aside 70% for spending through the budget, and the spending will be prioritized along the 4 priorities established by the current administration. So it's going to be business as usual for me. Just that, given that the global prices for oil are not looking too good, increasing our output enables us to generate more revenue to finance our development.
So in order that the wrong impression is not created, we will be getting some revenue even from the oil side.
Yeah, we are getting revenue from oil side, and we are likely to also get access to our gas. There's a certain percentage of gas that also belong to us, which we can monetize. You see, we talk about petroleum, and it's a combination of gas and oil. And so the formula for sharing these products apply to the Sankofa Jiname field. So we're going to get some revenue which we can use to finance our development.
So in operationalizing, turning this revenue into development that is visible, so that this narration we are seeing from persons we are interviewing will change. What is the key thing that you feel must change in the structure, the way we monitor and manage the resources?
Well, I see change already happening. If I look at the current administration's budget, they have dedicated, I think, as much as $290 million to finance free SHS. So that way we can monitor that particular expenditure. The good thing too is that it enables a lot more Ghanaians to feel the direct benefit of oil revenues in their lives. My daughter will be going to SS, for instance, and therefore having the fees paid means that I have directly or indirectly benefited from oil revenue. So is the other person whose children will be in secondary school either this year or next year. And so for me, it's a marked shift that we welcome. Again, infrastructure is prioritized in the expenditure, and this is also in direct response to the infrastructure deficit that we have currently in the country. So that's also a good expenditure area. What I would encourage the government to avoid is to spread thinly even within the chosen areas. If it is infrastructure, we need to select just a few infrastructure. We could decide, for instance, that we want to do just railway line with our oil revenue. And for that, we'll be able to point to that line as a direct benefit of our oil resources. That way, Ghanaians will feel the direct impact of oil in their lives.
With the issue of being able to monitor what the funds are used for, this is an issue that came up. And again, infrastructure is a prioritized area. How easy would it be to be able to monitor? Because this is exactly what we're supposed to do. In fact, some would argue that it would be much easier to track a building that is being built than whether or not a child going to school has been catered for.
Well, precisely the point I'm making. When you come to, for instance, the issue of free SHS, are the children in school? Yes, they are in school. Once they are in school, it means the fees are being paid for. Otherwise, there's no way the schools can continue to teach the children if the fees are not being paid for. So it's easy to monitor. Of course, we need to put in place systems to avoid the kinds of corruption associated with the health insurance scheme, where you have ghost names appearing on the roll. So we need to ensure that at least we don't have ghost students on the roll being paid for. That is one. In terms of infrastructure, I mean, in the past practice, we had a situation where there were hundreds of roads being undertaken across the country. When you do that, it becomes very difficult to monitor and to track progress of implementation. Under the current administration, I see a certain intent on spending the infrastructure budget on fewer projects. I think railway line is one of them, and that way we are able to track in terms of how many kilometers of railway lines we've been able to lay in a particular year. So I think the fewer projects we spend the money on, the easier it becomes in terms of tracking and monitoring progress of implementation of these projects.
Now, there has been a challenge with how the revenues are used in tandem with the revenues we already have. So that, for instance, in the previous, and I see you nodding your head on this point, in the previous administration, we find that money is supposed to go to agriculture, but it is only oil money that is going into agriculture. The original budgetary commitments to agriculture was not made in tandem with the oil revenue. How do we safeguard against this so that we don't break the back of this sector?
That is a major and a legitimate concern. We need to avoid a situation where oil revenue come in to replace government resources or government revenues in terms of financing our development. It is not just in agriculture. We found this also in education. In 2015 and then to some extent 2016, we found that oil revenue was used to finance everything education. Free the capitation, there was a capitation grant, there was school feeding program, there was textbooks, jotters, chalk, and so forth. And so you found that if you have a dedicated fund, like the GET fund, for undertaking this project, because there were also infrastructure projects undertaken with oil revenue, then you ask yourself, what did the GET fund finance in that particular year? To a very large extent, it creates opportunities for abuse of the GET fund. And so we need to ensure that whatever revenue that comes from the oil sector comes to complement and not to replace existing earmark funds for those activities.
It's live on News Desk. We are speaking here to Dr. Steve Mantiao. He's a member of the Public Interest Accountability Committee. He's also chairman of the Civil Society Platform on Oil and Gas. Stay tuned because we want to get the perspective of what the people on the ground actually think from a man who's been living with them for years. You don't want to go away. Thanks for staying with us. Like I promised you, we have with us in the studio someone who has been living with the people of the Western region for a number of years and has been speaking to them about these issues. Assistant editor here at Joy News, Kweku Osu Paper. Kweku, yes. Welcome. So earlier we were listening to the views of some people, many of whom were saying that, look, we are disappointed, we had expectations, they've not been met. You visited most of the coastal communities, particularly which are very close to the oil discovery and the itinerant industries. What is the feel when you speak to them?
I mean, for many people who live in the Western region, who are indigenes of the Western region, another oil find or another FPSO just means to them a loss of another fishing ground for the fishermen. They whipped up emotions of dashed expectations of getting jobs. What it means also to them is that people from Accra or other parts of the country who are much more skilled than they are going to get the jobs that they thought they deserved because it's just in their neighborhood. It means really nothing much than another person getting richer at their expense. For the first oil, Jubilee, the euphoria around it, the excitement around it. When I was part of the first oil, I felt Takoradi was going to change in 3 years or 4 years.
Around 2007.
Years. Yes.
I was living in Takoradi around that time. You could feel it in the air.
Yes. And in 2010, when the valves were turned for
commercial production.
For commercial production, there were hopes. Real big hopes that things are going to change. But it's been, 7 years? And the changes have not been positive. I mean, very positive. I know a few people who have gotten jobs, a few residents of Takoradi who have gotten jobs as caterers on the FPSO, as pipe pushers, as rustabouts. And they are paid quite well compared to the average worker in Ghana, but compared to his colleague from Nigeria, he's not paid.
Expatriates.
Not paid so well. You might argue about expatriate fees and all of that. Yes, So for those who have been lucky to get some jobs in the establishments, their lives and that of the few who depend on them have seen some changes. But for the thousands and hundreds who are still in the queue waiting to have some benefits, that has not come. But it's not all that gloomy also, because you see, Takoradi used to be a very, very hopeless situation when it comes to a city and its prospects for growth and development. Why do I say so? When I got to Takoradi in 2007, you couldn't provide hotel accommodation for, I mean, top class, high-end hotel accommodation for 200 people. There was not a facility like that.
And now?
At best, you could have Planters Lodge with a few rooms. And which one? Also, and Hill Rainbow or something.
If you keep naming them, we'll have to invoice them at the end of the show.
But just to say that now
even
with oil,
in these sectors,
with oil, there's a real boom in that
industry. But has it impacted the people?
Of course. People get jobs in these restaurants and hotels. You would not find a coffee shop in Takoradi in 2007. Who will open it? Who will go there? If you did a show in any of those auditoriums there, you find only 50 people attending. Now you can run a whole live show in Takoradi and you have people coming in to watch. So Takoradi has seen some light. The Takoradi airport has now gotten flights coming in more often than it used to be. There's been some benefits. Banks in the financial sector. There are, when I got to Takoradi 2007, there were just about 5 or 6 banks there. Now there are more than 20 banks in Takoradi.
So in a nutshell, there is some developments, but it hasn't gotten down to the ordinary man on the street.
And that is,
I'm surprised Kweku didn't even mention the media, radio stations.
Yes, there's also been to give some of us jobs to do. Right. But anyway, Kweku, earlier Doc was making the point that the expectations were too high, particularly there. I mean, would you agree with that point?
Of course, when you have former President Kuffour saying that, I mean, Ghana was going to change with the oil find, and if Ghana is supposed to change with a major find, and you live in Western region or live in Takoradi, it will start from there. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything else.
It was renamed the Oil City.
Yeah, we did so. We called it the Oil City. We rebranded the city and called it the Oil City. And the expectations were huge. I mean, people actually began to imagine skyscrapers in Takoradi. People began to think of overhead bridges, I mean, a lot of mighty and real good things coming into Takoradi. But those were because we imagined that the oil was going to be pumped through pipes onshore. That's at the start, 2007, 2008, when there was little or no knowledge about how it's going to be. Nobody had heard about an FPSO before. Our imagination was that from Cape 3 Points, there will be pipes, like the pipes that transport the gas to offshore Atuabo, to Takoradi, or to Cape 3 Points. And then there will be tankers that would lift the pipes to bulk storage facilities, and there will be a refinery that will also refine the thing, and then there will be a whole big industry there on ground. If that had happened, then there would have been real significant testimonial impact.
But were we told these things would happen? What were the promises that were made around this oil discovery?
Nobody promised anybody anything. But
it was just the imagination.
If you look at the templates from Nigeria, when it was onshore, and the people that got benefits, and not forgetting the other related negative impact, you would naturally assume that, yes, if it's oil, why would you, and there's a platform that is draining the oil from the belly of the earth, why would you bring another vessel to just lift it and take it away? Bring it here, bring it home, so that we can all work on it, in it, and get jobs. So that was, nobody made that promise to anybody, but that was the expectation. That was how people imagined it would work. Now, when we began to hear in 2009 that Tullow was bringing in something that would be called an FPSO that would just be moored onto the platform and lift the oil, take it away smoothly without anybody seeing the oil, then people began to get realistic and say, hey, so I think no go be. And that was the beginning of the disappointment. In Tullow's plan, they also were overtaken by time. GMPC, at that time there was no Petroleum Commission. GMPC was supposed to do that hard work of educating the people and telling them, Jack, it's not going to be as we imagined it. Tell you what, during the environmental impact assessment processes, where we went to all the CESCO South districts, that was when the revelation of the construction of an FPSO from Singapore was made. But people,
and the people reacted in...
People didn't just understand it. Now you are not bringing it to the shore. You are bringing an FPSO to lift it. And you are also telling us that fisheries will be... I mean, fishermen cannot go there.
Wow. A very clear picture being painted there for us. Doc, we are nearly out of time. Let me just come to you. And in your final comments, if we are going to move forward, what are the expectations that we must look at meeting now? And what must be done differently?
Well, I think there's not much we can do about the expectation. The people of the Western region are still clamoring for what they describe as an equitable share of the returns from that those investments being made in their region, which for me is a fair demand, but that can be dealt with differently. There are provisions in the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, Section 24, 2 and 3, which deals with compensation for adverse impacts. My reading of that particular aspect of the law gives me the indication that the reference is to socioeconomic impacts, because it talks about communities who are impacted adversely by the activities. So for instance, if the people of Shamar can claim that as a result of the oil activities, there's been excessive pressure on existing housing stock, as a result of which rents have gone up, they can actually lay a claim for affordable housing, which will be made through the petroleum revenue, etc. And it goes for all other communities who may, in one way or the other, be impacted. I would encourage that the assemblies in these areas take another look at the provisions of the Act and see how they can demand compensation for the unintended socioeconomic impacts. For me, that is one way to go. But let me also, coming back to the issue of environmental impacts, let me say that we have learned some lessons since Jubilee. In the time of Jubilee, the equipment we used, which was the FPSO Kwame Nkrumah, did not meet international standard. We used a single hull tanker against the IMO, International Maritime Organization's own recommendation to phase out the use of single hull tanker for the purposes of FPSOs. We raised those concerns, but our environmental regulators did not take notice. Tullow gave assurance that, to those of us who were fighting against the use of single hull tanker, that going into the TEM project, they will use a double hull tanker. This they have done, which is an improvement. But we found also that the Jubilee partners, both for Jubilee, particularly the Jubilee partners, also failed to undertake a fisheries impact assessment, and the quality of the environmental impact assessment that they did also left a lot to be desired. Now, going into the TEM field, we see a great deal of improvement. The environmental impact assessment done is much more improved than upon the Jubilee and the TEM project. Again,
so does that mean that some of the problems that we saw earlier would not be coming up again, at least in relation with Sankofa?
Relatively, yes, there will be less than we saw under Jubilee, because ENI, again, out of its own volition, because let me say that all the partners in Jubilee and TEM project have actually failed to undertake a direct, a specific fisheries impact assessment. ENI, out of its own volition, has undertaken a fisheries impact assessment. I'm in the process of trying to obtain a copy to see what is in there. But to the extent that they've actually voluntarily complied with the legal recommendation when all the others have failed to comply with, shows a certain improvement going forward and lessons being drawn from our two oil fields that were initiated earlier.
Thank you very much, Dr. Steve Mantiakweku. Let me come to you for your final comments. We've heard of the improvements that have come up in the Sankofa field. Will these do the trick, or the problems are much deeper than these?
I mean, I from the perspective of a resident or
a former resident, now you relocate.
No, my wife and children are there, so I still live there. And from the perspective of maybe a chief or somebody from a Tuabo, I mean, whether you change a double hull or single hull, they don't care. That's for your business. I need a job. Talk of Ghana Gas. Talk of ENI. This gas processing plant that they are going to be establishing, they are building actually, just around Atuabo. They would have to employ the people. Ghana Gas still has the Chinese in there.
It's been handed over now to 100% Ghanaian.
Yeah. The Chinese have all left.
The Chinese have all left now.
Okay, as of a few months ago when I checked, they were still there, and the people were clamoring. People need to get their fisheries business going. Now another FPSO means another 500 meters cordon. Another will come, which means another 500 meters off. It's pitching one industry against the other.
Those are questions that we'll need to look at very, very critically. Let's let those who are saying. Let me just inform our viewers that we are monitoring events in the Western region where the president will be turning the valve for the John Ejekum Kuffour field on the FPSO on the Sankofa field. That's what happened in the afternoon, around the time for Joy News today, and possibly after that. But stay tuned to Joy News. We will ensure that we'll bring you all the live footage from them. My colleague George Riafe of the business desk is there. Elton John Brobe is also there. So now we'll take a quick break for business. Emmanuel Abuaji Riafe will be bringing us the latest, but stay tuned.